Hello class, this is the second lesson of Painting with Jim. So today we are going to be looking at the work of an artist named Gustav Klimt, as well as doing a little painting demo here in his style, which is a lot of fun. A lot of times I'll wear the hat of an artist, so to speak, to try to maybe learn maybe about their process. You can learn a lot from these kind of YouTube videos and how-to books. But honestly, the best way to learn is to just buy a book by an artist that you like and look at the pictures, right? And as you paint, try to think about how they might have accomplished the things that you're seeing. So just a little context here. This is probably Klimt's most famous work, called The Kiss. He was Austrian from Vienna, and he was part of this group of artists called the Vienna Secession. Okay, and these guys seceded, if you will, from the painters of the day to do something radical, to do something different. And they had their own space. The government actually supported them, and they had their own exhibitions. So what's interesting about this is just look at it's a lot more about kind of pattern and texture, right? And these kind of shapes that are very unusual. So take a look at this shape here, right? Unusual for two figures, kind of blocking them together. And if you get really close, you can see all the interesting thing that's happening there. There's even real texture because you painted with what's called gold leaf, which is actually a very thin layer of gold. Okay, also another famous painting. I forget the name of this one, but obviously it's a portrait. Okay, you could see. Look at that gold. So if gold is your thing, Klimt's your guy. And you could see, look at all those eyeballs going on there. He kind of used something traditional like portraiture and got weird within it. That's a lot of times what happens. You take something kind of traditional and you go with it and you make it your own. So that's kind of his most famous works. He, by the way, painted late 1800s, early 1900s, just for some context. That's kind of the famous stuff. I love, when an artist kind of goes a little deeper, a little bit smaller, a little bit more intimate. So a lot of times I'm really drawn to the work of an artist like either early in their career when they're just trying to figure things out, or really, really late when they're kind of like proven to the world what they wanted to do, and they kind of slow down. And there's a confidence there because they're so famous, they don't need the money anymore. They don't need the fame, but they're just painting for themselves. So there's an example, right? This is a radical painting, in my opinion, of a landscape here. And a postcard I got, I think from the Musée d'Orsay. Someone could check my French pronunciation. And it is really about texture here, almost like pattern, right? So it's a landscape of these trees and flowers. Incredible. I'll show you another one here. Okay, right, these poppy flowers here. It's a landscape, but man, look at that texture. And then look at over here. One word to describe that, I would say madness. I would not know how to paint that just by looking at it. I'd have to try it out. So that's what today's about. We're going to try painting in this style. And why this style? Well, I find inspiration in certain artists, and he is certainly one of them. I always have books out when I paint my own stuff, and he's part of my usual suspects that I have out. Now, let's look here. Okay, another one you can see. Again, don't have a printer, so working from the iPad. So you just have to improvise. Okay, here's a photo. This is on one of Arlington's trails. It's just right by Bluemont Park. Okay, so the trails were open. I went there Sunday morning, a nice foggy day. Kind of the overcast light. It's actually kind of a bright, even light. So instead of having like direct light with tons of shadows, it's a very kind of, like I said, overcast, and you get this kind of nice, even lighting. So you can see that here. See how there's trees in the background? They don't have huge shadows, right? So I put the camera up to the kind of grass weeds that you're seeing here and flowers. And so the camera is actually on the ground touching the leaves, and then I have it angled out so you can see into the background here. So that's going to be my jumping off point. Okay, put that here on the side. Oh, here's actual something too. Square, right? Rectangle, so really quick. This makes my life so much easier, and it will yours too. Let's go and make it a square, right? But let's keep that interesting background, right? Okay, let's do that. Done. Easy. Now I have a square. Square to square. That's a lot easier. Okay, this was an old painting, old demo from class, and I just covered it with purple, right? A nice bright purple. Again, I want to contrast kind of these cooler green and blues that I see in this picture against the warmer kind of reddish purple pinks here. Let me put my reference here. Okay, again, have my supplies. If you watched last week's video, I did a quick rundown. Start with the least interesting, paper towels. I have my Terpenoid Natural, non-toxic, good stuff. An array of brushes. Okay, even some watercolor brushes because I'm going to be painting kind of small. And I'm going to break the rules a little bit. And I'll show you how to use those to great effect. I have my a solvent-free gel here, also non-toxic, which is great. And then I have my paints. Same paints as the tiger or the leopard eye last week. With a few additions, I have a lemon yellow. Notice how orange and warm this yellow is, and how this yellow is a bit cooler, as if someone took this yellow and mixed in some white and maybe even a hint of blue, maybe just a touch of green. Okay, coming down here, I have same colors except for this one, Prussian blue, imported directly from Prussia. I did rehearse that joke, if you're wondering, and it landed flat in my head, and I'm not sure how it's doing out there. Okay, and then magenta, color you can't mix, right? It's a really, really kind of intense purple red. Let me show you actually a little bit. That's a hard color to mix from those colors I have. Okay, just to show you. Let me show you Prussian blue too. It's almost black, but watch. You'll really know the difference when you add white to it. Ooh, what a beautiful blue, right? And it's making a beautiful green. All right, color, I might have mentioned last week. I think it's very subjective, so you will be drawn to your own colors. Different brands make different color types. So for example, you could have cadmium red in 3 different brands and 3 different cadmium reds. It's up to you which one works best. So these are kind of like my colors, the ones I feel most comfortable with, and I try to introduce, a new color here and there, every year or so that you just get familiar and you experiment. New colors will lead to new discoveries. Okay, enough said. Let's go in with, now that I have this Prussian blue out, I added a little bit of the gel just to thin it out a little bit, make it flow a little better. Let me do just a quick sketch, right? I want to try to get this composition here as quickly as possible. So how do I make a landscape? That's what this is, the landscape. The quickest way to do a landscape is a straight line. This is called the horizon line. It's where the sky meets the earth. Sometimes it's where the sky meets the water. Sometimes it's where maybe the mountains rest on top of the land. But if you can imagine, and the world was just sky and land, right? It would just be flat, straight line. Okay, it's a little crooked, right? How many years have I been painting? Gosh, probably 16, right, with oils. How many years have I been drawing? Probably 34. Do I still make mistakes, like a crooked line? Absolutely. Okay, some of us get lucky and get it perfect right off the bat, and the rest of us have to work for it. Okay, there's my line. Look at that. If I were to fill in this here with some sky colors, and this here with some earth colors or watercolors, I would have a pretty simple landscape. So if you're not sure what to paint, right, just take a photo of like this fairly simple, even though it isn't in some of its complexities. But as far as composition goes, it's just a whole lot of green flowers. You know, there's a tree here and some trees in the background, but I'm trying to keep it simple. Notice there aren't any, you know, kids running and playing, and cabins with smoky chimneys and city skyscrapers and signs and power lines. I try to kind of ignore that stuff because I'm just a bit more of a simple painter, right? Not interested in all those details because I just think this is so beautiful. This is where I want to focus in here, in those flowers. And there was a version of this photo with my son pushing his stroller. So I was taking photos of plants and he was pushing the stroller. We were both having fun. Okay. So there's a line. That's all I need to make a landscape, and I can just fill it in. Now, is there anything else I need to add? Well, maybe that tree. Okay, that tree, it's going to be harder, I think, at this point to paint around. So let me just add that in. And it's just a sketch at this point, right? It's probably the only time I'm going to be adding lines through this whole process. Now, there's another tree here. You're probably saying, like, well, what about that tree? Well, as the trees get thinner and more detailed, it sometimes is easier to leave them out. And I am. That might be easier because it's just a thin line just to paint over the sky once I get that in. All right. Time to go to a bigger brush. And total process, same at this point. Even though I'm trying to paint like my friend here, Gustav Klimt, I am working the same process that I would if I was just painting like Jim Halloran. So a lot of times beginning steps are kind of the same, right? And it's near the end, near those details where things get radically different. Okay. So what do I need to do? I need to like mass in all this color, all this green. So I primed you guys about Prussian blue and lemon yellow. I bought both of those colors at the same time, maybe about 5 years ago, and it changed everything for me because the color I was using, all of a sudden the greens got different, right? And when I was using the same green for a long time, that kind of change was a big change, right? Okay. Kind of a green, blue, turquoise. So I'm going to start with the dark color. I remember reading somewhere, I forget if it was an artist or a teacher, but they said if you can hear your paintbrush brushing, you don't have enough paint. And that's when I realized I've never had enough paint. I've been called, mostly by myself, a stingy painter, and I know that. But I think in the beginning, I don't like to make a huge mess, right? It's every artist's dream to be a loose painter, meaning to use a lot of paint and get it right, paint it and leave it. You know, one brush stroke to make the tree. But I'm just not that lucky or maybe talented yet. So I still use thin layers in the beginning. Okay, you guys with me? Now I could just use a bigger brush, but what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to make it darker at the bottom and lighter as it gets on top. You can see that here. Again, it's an iPad, so you're getting all that kind of synthetic blue light. I can see the colors a lot more richer. So you can imagine though that you can see that here. It's darker here, and as we go up, it gets more yellow because you're seeing more flowers. It's very bright here. And as things go into the background, they call that atmospheric perspective. As things get further away, they get less saturated, meaning less color, less intense color. So let's say if this were all red near the front, I imagine there's all red flowers, it'd be red at the bottom, maybe dark red at the bottom, and as I'd go back, I'd get more pink. Because how do you desaturate color? Adding white. So maybe I can even add a little white here. And it will create an illusion that things are going further back because the color lessens, gets less intense. It's like the Blue Ridge Mountains, right? They're Blue Ridge Mountains because they actually look blue from a distance, right? But when you get up close, they're green with trees all over and grass and whatnot. But further away tends to turn blue. Okay. And wow, I love that red coming through, that reddish purple here. That's kind of like the Mark Rothko effect. He's another artist, maybe for another day, but because this is purple underneath and I'm green on top, I would not be able to make that color unless that purple underneath has dried. I went on top. This is actually a decent painting for how little work I've done. You know, maybe someday down the line, I'm a bit more loose and abstract, and maybe this is my finished piece. I could be happy with this, but I'm still trying to go for this, and more particularly this Gustav Klimt effect here. Okay, the background, gosh, the background. I just added green and I realized, oop, not green. For contrast, I have greens down here. Let's stay away from green on top and maybe go more warm. So warm, add a little bit of white because it's very bright and light. Warm is like kind of this pinkish color and maybe even a little bit of this orange. Okay, kind of an intense color. So I'm going to tone it down or gray it down and maybe add what to add to make it more gray. Let's see, maybe a touch of Prussian blue. So overall it's very warm, but look what that blue did. Kind of grayed everything down. Why did I go to a smaller brush? Well, a smaller area, right? If this were a huge painting, I'd be using huge brushes. You know, usually work from the big stuff to the smallest, okay? You know, go for the foundations first and work your way up to the detail. We all want to do detail first. Okay, and that's okay. I can show some of that purple through. That's actually not so bad here, right? Kind of cool. So that kind of orangey colors with kind of purple showing through. All right, couple things. I have this area here. That's what this painting is about, right? That's why I cropped it like this. That's why I had the camera so close to the ground, because I wanted to see a lot of this. That's where I'm to next, but I'm gonna just clean up my tree here. I might go back and make it a bit more maybe red and brown, but for now I'm gonna put some of that blue on top. Okay, what do you guys think? Not too bad. Okay, so here's the Gustav Klimt effect. Okay, let me just show you this reference again. You know, that's what I'm going for. I said it's kind of like madness, right? Because there's so much. But what I'm guessing he did, and I did not read about the process beforehand. Sometimes that can definitely enlighten you, but sometimes that can confuse you too. So I'm painting by instinct here. I'm just going to go by what I think I see, and then try to paint, see how close we can get. So I think it was probably a flat color first, and then he went with maybe some dark green, made dots all over. Light green, dots all over. Maybe blue, dots all over. Red, dots all over. Yellow, etc., etc., etc. I'm pretty sure that's the process. He might have let things dry in between. Actually, in fact, I think he did, because either he's using really dry paint, meaning no medium, right? And you can see like the red. Look how pristine and clean the red is, right? It doesn't blend in anywhere else. So that's what I'm thinking. We don't have that luxury of time. I could have done a time lapse and done this a little bit every day, but I'm just not that type of painter today. Not to say we won't do that in the future, but I'm going to try to approach his technique in a different way, the way I think that might work. Okay, so I have some dark greens on. You can see dark green, especially here. It gets a little lighter as we go up, but I'm gonna do some kind of polka dots here. Think of it like polka dots or pattern. It's like a pattern of a dress or something. Texture on, or not texture, but like a kind of a pattern on textile or fabric. Okay, I'm mixing up some of that yellow here, and maybe even some of the blue. Interesting that as these leaves here, kind of clover shapes, are closer to me, they're bigger, more defined. As they go back, I mean, they just disappear. So I'm going to start at the bottom with bigger kind of shapes and work my way back. Now this is important. Notice how I keep dipping into the paint. Okay. After every stroke, I'm dipping into the paint. Why? Well, I will just run out of paint because there's wet paint underneath, which is kind of just absorbing the paint I'm putting down. But look what's happening. I'm starting to create a pattern. And what I'm also trying to do is to vary my pattern. That is so important. If you learn one thing from this demo is that to make something look natural is to vary your brush strokes. If the grass is growing at the same height in the same direction, it will look probably like a bad painting, and it will feel unnatural. And what I mean by feel is it won't have that kind of authenticity that nature actually is really good at, because nature is full of surprises. So the more you look, usually the more surprises you see. I'm going to add some smaller ones as I get further towards the top. They start to get a little smaller. But see, overall, the same pattern, like I said, polka dots, but they are varying in shape and size. My painting teacher, who taught me really how to paint, Marianne Walliger-Doring, she said that she was doing an outdoor art show and she had all her paintings up. She lived on a farm, so she painted a lot of farm scenes, and the grass was always blowing from left to right and she didn't notice until they were all hung up side by side. Okay, so I'm doing a lot of dipping into that paint, right? Now, I'm building something. The impatient artist is saying, oh boy, why did you do this demo? It looks strange, and it's not what you have in your head at all. But the patient artist in me, and the one who's been painting for a long time, knows that there's no instant gratification in this kind of style, that it's all about building layers. And this is just one or maybe two of maybe 3 or 4 layers. So I have to be patient. I also have invested 23 minutes in this video, and I don't want to turn back. Okay. What do you think? I actually think that's kind of interesting. Remember I said it gets lighter and whiter as it goes up, desaturated with color? So let me introduce some white. And at this point, my dots need to start getting a little smaller. And funny enough, because they're smaller, I don't need as much paint. So notice I'm not dipping in as much as I go back. I have to address the silence. I have just entered the zone. And so the zone is that place where your brain shuts off and things start to become automatic, right? It's like you're riding a bike down. Actually, let's say the beginning is like you're riding your bike up the hill. And I just kind of passed the highest point and I'm going downhill. So I pick up speed and I have to do less and less and less because things start to become automatic. I'm not working as hard because my brain has kind of taken over and things start to become automatic. Okay, interesting, right? Different style too. New style for me, I should say that. This is not going to look as good as maybe that leopard's eye because I have less experience with it. But it's important, right? We're all using this time. As artists, a lot of artists are using the time as a luxury to paint more, experiment more, right? Make things for themselves. That's what I'm doing here. It's so important to keep things interesting for yourself. And I used to have a teacher that would say, if you're not being challenged, there's no point. So I don't know if things are that drastic, but if you're not being challenged, you're probably bored. And in that sense, maybe there's no point. Okay. Not bad. Now, I have kind of a uniform kind of pattern, right? It's a little bigger on the bottom. Maybe let's make a couple really stand out here. Maybe make them really kind of big. And that's kind of more interesting. Now I'm going to go in with a different color. Okay, maybe let's get a little crazy here. And do some maybe red, maybe a little magenta too. I have it. Let's try to use it. And as far as pattern goes, right, and texture, I can see kind of these darker areas here. I could certainly add black or dark, right, as shadow, but let's go with this magenta. Magenta and burnt sienna here. Let's go with that. Now, I'm not going exactly with what I'm seeing here. You know, I'm sidestepping a little bit. A lot of great discoveries in art are when you take what you know and you just shift to the left or right a little bit, right? Sidestep into someplace new. Look at that. I would say that has made the painting for me so far. You know, made it in terms of something I kind of like to something that I'm really liking. Okay. And again, are we doing what Klimt's doing? Are we being truthful? I think so. Now, again, I was bigger, thicker kind of spots near the bottom and smaller, right, thinner, maybe even a little lighter in the background. Okay. So far, so good. I think it's time for yellow. Now here's, I'm going to break the rules a little bit and use a watercolor brush. When the brush is this small, it actually doesn't matter that it's watercolor because a brush this big, if this were a watercolor brush, watercolor brushes are made for holding water, so the oil would just kind of kill the brush in terms of its strength. It would just kind of flop over. So basically, with a brush like this, when it's this small, it's actually pretty good at holding paint, any kind of paint, when it's this small. So I'm going in and mixing up some yellow. here. And this is where it's tricky because there's wet paint underneath and the green wants to mix with the yellow. So instead of putting yellow flowers down, I fear that I'm going to make light green flowers everywhere. So I'm really going to load up the paint. And load up the paint means a lot of paint. Kind of see it there. It actually has texture on the brush. And after every flower, I have to be patient and change maybe the shape and the direction. So watch one of these moves here. Right, it's going to be a little swoop. Ooh, that's okay. Ooh, that has petals, right? Yeah, let's go back to this one, this swoop. Let's do another one, see if we can get petals out of it. Hey, that works. Now maybe add a little more of a orangey yellow. Right? Remember I said vary it. Starting to get some more interest in here. I need to make them smaller. This brush, small as that looks, it's almost a little too clumsy for some of these small flowers in the background. So maybe I'll go even a smaller brush. Look at this, 3 flowers together. And they'll be maybe the star of the show here. There you go. There's 3 flowers together. Maybe do the same thing over there on that side. Not bad. Okay. Maybe at the end of all these, instead of saying not bad, I'll say great. I'll build my confidence here. Here's some small ones. Look at teeny tiny brush, right? So small, it's a number 0 brush. It barely exists. And I'm just curious, what is a brush smaller than this number? Do we get into negative numbers here? Okay, maybe polka dots. Really, really tiny little dots. Wow, and it kind of gives dimension, as if we're going further back into space. Right, as they go back, they get smaller, smaller, smaller. Now notice I haven't touched the sky or the tree, and I may not. I might leave that for another day. Just wanted to get that texture down here. Before we go though, one last thing. Since we're talking about Gustav Klimt, look at that. Gold paint. It actually has a metallic sheen to it if we look down here. Look at that. Okay. I bought it at Michael's and it wasn't too expensive, so I imagine it's not real gold. I won't lie to you. But it's pretty awesome. I could have done the flowers like gold to start. But let me just add, we'll pretend these are like some other little flowers here that are smaller kind of everywhere. Notice I didn't waste a lot of time cleaning brushes, right? I'm just threw a bunch of brushes out on the table so I can bounce between colors. Look at that, nice and gold. There's actually, there should be, let me see here, a metallic kind of sheen to it. Kind of see it, let's see. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, let's see. Maybe I'll attempt one tree here in the background. And then I better get ready for a meeting. So, getting the smaller brush here, going Prussian blue and maybe a little magenta. Just gonna go push that tree up here. Now there is some green around it here. See how I'm holding the brush kind of on its side? Just kind of push it around like that. You know what? I'm just gonna go for it. Paint this other one here, just to split up the space. 3 trees is a better number than 2. You know, odd numbers work a little better in terms of making something look natural. You know, less order. There we go. And you know what? Let me go in. I have some of this green yellow here. Let's add some of that on here too. Add a little color. All right. Anything else? Let me know. You can comment if there's anything else you would have done differently. I'll be honest, I didn't know how this would turn out. It was an experiment for me as well, so take a shot at it, right? I'd love to see your work and see what you can create. All right, thanks for spending some time with me. And look, we're about 10 minutes shorter than my last video, so I'm getting faster. All right, take care, guys.